Our guest today has been a staple at NFL Films for 46 years. The executive producer, the analyst when it comes to NFL matchup. He is the co-author of The Games That Changed the Game. He is my guy, the great Greg Cosell. Greg, how are you?
Mr. Schein, what's happening? Good to be with you as always.
Listen, it is your time to shine, my friends. It is draft season. I am so excited to chop it up with you. And Greg is the best when it comes to studying film and then projecting what a player is going to be at the NFL level. So I kind of want to start at the top. I want to get your film study and your take when it comes to Fernando Mendoza. Raiders fans are fascinated. They're fired up. I think he's going to be a terrific NFL quarterback. Is there a comp you see from prior scouting, different years, NFL comparison? What do you see when you break down the film on Mendoza?
Well, it's so interesting. And again, there's so many variables, as you know, Adam. You do this, this is what you do. There's so many variables that go into whether a quarterback is a good player, great player, average player. All we can do is look at the tape that we have right now and try to project. That's what teams do. So when you watch Mendoza, and I think we've gotten away from this to a large extent in our evaluation of quarterbacks, so many people talk about quarterback traits. And what they normally mean nowadays is that a quarterback has a big arm and he can run around. We seem to have lost a little bit the sense of the quarterback that can really execute at a high level an offense. In other words, be a ball distributor, be an executor of a well-schemed offense. Because the focus so much is on the other things, the athletic elements. And I'm not suggesting those things aren't important in today's NFL, but there's always going to be a place for a quarterback that can execute a really well-schemed offense at a high level. Ultimately, that's what Mendoza has to be in the league. Now, can he get a first down running once in a while? Sure. And people remember that touchdown run. I think it was against Miami in the championship game. Sure, he can do that once in a while. But if he's to be successful in the league, it's going to be because he is a 10 from the pocket. And all you can do is see what you see on tape. And there are certain things you don't see because it wasn't part of their offense. So all you can do is raise a question. For instance, he didn't throw the ball between the numbers very often at Indiana. That was not part of their offense. Does that mean he can't do it? I don't know the answer to that. No one knows the answer to that, but he didn't do that. Did I feel at times in the pocket with his movement, he was a little robotic? Yeah, I thought that way watching his tape. Is that a fatal flaw? Not necessarily. So as I said, I like Mendoza because I like the way he plays the game. There's a timing and rhythmic feel to the way in which he plays the game, and he is a very precise ball location thrower. And that's a trait that kind of gets lost in these conversations about athleticism and big arms. So my guess is he'll be a good player. Is he Josh Allen or Mahomes? Probably not. Is he more like, when all's said and done, a Jared Goff or a Matt Ryan? Probably. And you know what? Those guys are pretty good.
So it's funny that you mentioned those two names. I think Goff is the perfect comparison. And I think he's a really good to great quarterback. And he's had borderline MVP seasons. And, he's been to the Super Bowl. They had to get rid of him in order to win the Super Bowl. Matt Ryan, to me, has a Hall of Fame case, right? So, when you reference him, and also the Matt Ryan we saw in Boston College. So if he turns out to be Goff, to me, Greg, I, A, think that's a great comparison. And B, I think that means the Raiders got themselves a heck of a quarterback in Clint Kubiak's offense.
Don't forget, he's now going to be in an offense. And granted, he didn't play under center hardly at all in college. And there's no question that playing under center and turning your back to the defense in play action, which is a significant part of Clint Kubiak's offense, as we saw in Seattle, that's a learned trait, so there's no question he will learn that. But from everything you hear, he's one of those guys that is open to being coached hard and learning, and he will learn that. And I think it's a very good offense for him because a lot of those play actions, those are really defined reads and throws. So, and that's something I think he does really well. He's a very efficient executor of a well-schemed pass game. So, I would expect him to be a good player. I'm not in the business of parsing it to, is he going to be great? Is he going to be a Hall of Famer? I don't do that.
Right.
Just like I don't make lists. I don't do that. I just love to evaluate. But I think now, again, do they need to improve their O-line? Absolutely. And I'm sure that'll be a focus of their draft. Obviously, they signed Tyler Lindenbaum, so they really feel like they have that taken care of. And Lindenbaum will be the one that calls the protections. Mendoza will not be doing that, certainly not in his rookie season.
I'm fascinated to get your take because you studied the film when it comes to Tai Simpson. Because honestly, Greg, and he's pointing at us right now. I don't see it. I don't feel it. I don't view him, and I know you're not making lists, as a first-round pick. I don't think he's played enough football. I don't think he's played, frankly, enough good football. What do you see when you go under the hood on Tai Simpson?
Yeah, Simpson is interesting because what you do see when you watch the Alabama offense is you do see the kinds of route concepts and throws that are NFL throws. You saw a lot of deep digs. They ran a concept called dagger, which is an inside vertical and an outside dig. They ran that quite often, and he made those throws. He made those turkey hole shot throws versus cover two. So you saw the kinds of throws that you say, you know what, that's an NFL throw. I think that it's very hard to know with Simpson because he played extremely well early in the season. He had a phenomenal 4-game stretch. I forget which teams he beat, but he had a phenomenal 4-game stretch. And then he struggled down toward the end of the season. And I think a couple of things stand out. Number one, I think for the most part, he's a fundamentally sound quarterback. I think he throws a good ball. It's funny, you mentioned, is he a first-round pick? And I've been giving a lot of thought, and believe me, Adam, I don't have a brilliant answer for this, of what it means when we say a first-round pick. That can also be in the eye of the beholder and how someone sees a quarterback within the context of their offense. But is he a special prospect, the way we think of special, sort of the word that we all understand? Probably not. But can he execute an offense? Can he make NFL throws? Does he have mobility? Yes. But a couple of things stood out to me later in the season. Number one, I thought he became very uncomfortable at times when there were bodies around him. And he's not big. So I think that's something that you have to consider when you evaluate him. When you get to the NFL and there are bodies around you and you still got to deliver from the pocket and not fall away from throws or not hurry yourself. The term I always used is play fast. When not play fast, these are things you have to decide. There's not a large enough sample size for us to know for sure exactly what he is. But the good is good. And now, look, there's very few transcendent quarterbacks. We all get into this mode of, who's the next Josh Allen? Who's the next Patrick Mahomes? There's not 100 of those guys, Adam. You know that. So
100%.
Most guys have to fit into an offense that helps them in terms of defining reads and throws.
Let me ask it a little differently on Simpson and also other quarterbacks in this draft. When you look at Simpson, do you see a starting quarterback? How many other quarterbacks do you think in this draft, if any, would you call starting quarterbacks in the NFL?
Well, and that's a fascinating question because now you get into the whole team and scheme aspect. I think Tai Simpson can be a starting quarterback for sure, depending on the scheme that he's in. I think if you put him in Kevin O'Connell's offense, if you put Tai Simpson in a sort of Kyle Shanahan type offense, and there's many of those coaches in the league now, I think he could be an efficient player. If you're asking me if he could run any offense with any coach, I'd say probably no. But I think so much of quarterback play becomes dependent upon the coaching and the scheme. And that's why it's so hard to make these definitive evaluations of these quarterbacks that so many people do now. They treat this, Adam, as if it's a mathematical equation, and it's not. There's so many variables involved. I'll give you an example. Garrett Nussmeier, okay? I watched him last summer. I watched his 2024 tape. I watched, I think, 7 or 8 games. And I came away from his 2024 tape thinking this guy could be a quality starting quarterback in the National Football League. He threw with anticipation. He had a good arm. He had more than enough movement. He was aggressive. And I think you have to be aggressive in this league. You have to have an aggressive mindset because there are situations that absolutely demand that. And you've got to be willing to turn it loose. And then you watch him this year, and I know he had a serious core oblique injury. And And I could almost see watching him that he couldn't throw it the right way. And his year was, to be frank, was terrible. But after watching him last summer, I thought, you know what? In the right scheme, in the right system, this guy could be a quality starting quarterback. So much is dependent on so many variables that are go beyond just talent. Like you mentioned Simpson. You have some concerns, and that's totally valid because he's not special in the way we think of special. But you put him in the right system, maybe he needs a run game, a good O-line. The other factor too is the whole team. You don't want these quarterbacks. Look at Cam Ward last year, and I really like Cam Ward.
Sam, yeah, good point.
There were a lot of games where he had to put up 30 points just to compete. You don't want a rookie quarterback to have to be in that situation.
And I'm with you on Nussmeier as well. All right, I want to get into Jeremiah Love because, Greg, I am obsessed. Like, I can't get enough of Jeremiah Love, and I interviewed him on my SiriusXM radio show at the Super Bowl, and I mean, he was just so incredible as a human, on air, off air, his answers, the depth. I mean, I think he's kind of the perfect prospect. What do you see when you take a look at Love?
Well, I've got the same bromance with Love that you have. I really like Love. I mean, the more I watched him, the more I thought of Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, almost like a combo platter. And don't forget, last year, Bijan Robinson, 20% of his snaps, he lined up detached from the formation, and I think Love can do the same thing. So now it gets into sort of the question, the conventional wisdom question, Adam, which, everybody talks about. I would never take a running back in the first round. Well, look, do I have an answer for that? No, and nobody really does. People like to say they do, but he's a playmaker. He's a running back. You can line him up outside at wide receiver. I mean, I was at the combine when he wanted to run that last route again because he was unhappy with the rep that he had prior. I mean, this guy is a playmaker that can score from anywhere on the field. Look at what Jahmyr Gibbs has done for the Lions, what he does. Look what Bijan Robinson does. And I know there are people listening that might say, well, these teams haven't gone to the Super Bowl. You know what? Only 2 teams go to the Super Bowl. That's not the way we evaluate players. You evaluate players for what they can do for you in your offense. And to me, Love he's an explosive weapon. To me, there are 2 players on offense in this draft that are truly explosive weapons that, to me, go beyond their position. Their conventional wisdom about their position, and that's Jeremiah Love and Kenyon Sadiq. I think those 2 players go beyond the conventional thought process of their position.
I'm obsessed with Sadiq as well, so that's a great one. How about Styles and Downs? Because these are a couple of guys who, again, and I've talked to NFL people about this, like, I kind of roll my eyes. Oh, you can't draft a middle linebacker. You can't draft a safety. You can't draft a running back. Well, I can, and I will, and especially this year. So what do you see when you study the film on these guys?
Well, and again, now, we spoke about offense and schemes. Defense is very similar. Vic Fangio, for instance, and there's a lot of Fangio disciples. Linebacker is a critical position in a Vic Fangio defense. Think about Zach Bond. And then, I give Vic Fangio a ton of credit because Zach Bond had never played stack backer in his career. And then he comes to Philly, he puts him at stack backer, and he's an all-pro type player. But in a Vic Fangio defense, stacked backer is a really, really important position and critical to how the whole defense is played. So since there's a lot of disciples from Vic Fangio in the league, to look at someone like Styles, and, I think we would both agree that he's a little freakish with his physical traits, if you draft him and you run that style of defense, he becomes a really critical piece in what you do. And from everything I gather, he's supposed to be an unbelievable kid. I don't know if you know him at all. I mean, I just sit in my office here at NFL Films. I'm kind of a recluse. I sit in my office at NFL Films, so I don't get to meet these guys and talk to them. But I understand he's a tremendous kid.
I've never met him, but I talked to Matt Patricia about him, and he said the exact same thing. Like, called him one of the favorite players he's ever been around at any level of football.
Yeah, so there you go. It depends on your scheme. If you're going to run that kind of scheme, that player is really, really critical to what you do.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. Now, I'm curious in terms of pass rusher, right? We have a lot of Jets fans who are watching. Do you have a favorite pass rusher in this draft?
Well, It's interesting. Part of doing what you do is obviously I watch the tape and I see what I see, but part of this is what are we doing this for? It's all projection and transition, correct? That's what we're trying to do. That's what teams are trying to do. Sometimes you get it wrong. You see something and you think, oh, this guy can do this, and maybe it doesn't work. But I'm an Arvell Reese guy. I think down the road he's 20 years old, as you probably know, Adam, and I think that just based on reps that I've seen, because obviously I watched a ton of Ohio State defense. Based on reps that I've seen, I think he can become a really dominant edge pass rusher. Now, it's always easy to make comparisons, and I'm not going to sit here and say he's Micah Parsons next week, but I think that he has that kind of it's in his body. Let's put it that way. To be that guy. Could he be that guy tomorrow? Probably not. Probably needs some work. But I think just with the explosiveness, I mean, he's a little bit freakish. So, to me, is he the best pass rusher as we sit here and I speak to you today? Probably not. But I think down the road with that body type, with that physicality, I mean, he had some reps this year with that one-arm stab where he just pushed offensive tackles right back into the pocket. I'm sure you've seen some of those. So I really like him. Now, if you're asking me who the best pass rusher is right now as we sit here today, I'd probably say the best pass rusher is David Bailey. If you ask me who's the best all-around defensive end, I'd probably say Reuben Bain. So it all depends on what you're looking for within the context of your defense.
3 different answers. I love that. 2 very different questions. It's a terrific response.
Yeah, there's so many variables here, as you know. It's not, these are, as I said a moment ago, they're not mathematical equations.
100%. Now, this is my favorite question. Save the best for last. The wide receivers.
Okay.
Because I do this with you every year, and you bat 1,000 on this. I mean, you were the guy years ago who said George Pickens, talent-wise, this guy's going to be a star. And you were right. And again, you're not talking about character or anything else, or just what you see on the film. Right. So I want to know who is the best receiver in this class, and maybe a guy who's not getting enough attention, who has the Greg Cosell stamp of approval at the wide receiver position.
Again, now it comes down to how guys are deployed, but there's 2 guys whose tape that I find really interesting. One is talked about, and that's Casey Concepcion. I looked at his tape, and I just see him as really fitting the NFL game today. He's a 3-level dimension. He's terrific run after catch. You can use him on jet sweeps, orbit reverses. To me, he fits the NFL game. And, the game has changed in the passing game, as you know, Adam. This delineation between he's an X receiver, he's this, he's that. I don't want to say it's totally fallen by the boards, but it's not the same as it was. Because now teams, there's so much pre-snap movement. There's so many reduced splits. It's not where, hey, you put a guy outside the numbers and that's where he is all the time. So Casey Concepcion is a receiver I really like. And I'm going to give you a small school guy. And again, smaller school guys, you never know because of their competition. But I think the traits, and again, not knowing the player, but traits to me are really high level, and that's Ted Hurst from Georgia State. To me, watching his tape, and I understand the level of competition, so if it doesn't work right away, I get it, and I'm sure I'll be ripped on social media. That's the world in which we live. But Ted Hurst is 6'3 plus. He can run. He caught a ton of balls between the numbers. And I know it's not the NFL, but I think in this league, you've got to catch balls between the numbers if you're a wide receiver. So he was just somebody that I knew nothing about other than a name on a sheet of paper on a list. And I watched him, and I came away thinking, if this guy was in a Power 4 conference, to me, he'd be a first-round pick. But he's not in a Power 4 conference, so he won't be a first-round pick.
Greg, you're the best. I mean, we could do this all day. Appreciate it. Know the audience loves it as well. Continued success, my friend, and appreciate the time as always.
Thanks, Adam. Love being with you as always.
Greg Cosell, he's the best.